Okay, so in this video, we're going to play around with SDL's mouse events, and pretty much this is going to be a video that's going to help you kind of understand how mouse events work in SDL. So to get started, we're just going to write out some boilerplate for SDL. So we're going to create a new SDL point, and this point is going to just store the state of the current location of the mouse per frame. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to create a vector of points just to store every single point that how should I put it? So I'm going to make a new vector of points, which is going to be a container of all the points that we clicked on the screen so far. Okay, so next up, what we want to do is we want to handle these events. So we're going to say, while true, this is going to be the main loop. We're going to poll these events. So we're going to say, while SDL poll event. And then I'm going to pass in the event. Or should I say I'm going to pass in an event struct into this function. Then what we're going to do is we're going to check what kind of event this is. So if this is a quit event, what we're going to do is we are going to say SDL quit. Then we're going to say exit. And we're going to exit with 0. Next, we're going to check if the event type is a mouse button event. So let's say if your mouse button is down, it's going to emit some event, and we are going to check if you click the mouse button. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if event type is equal to SDL mouse button down. In this case, what we are going to do is we're going to initialize two variables. I'm going to call this int x and y. So I'm going to create two integers, and what I'm going to do is I am going to get the mouse state in this current moment. So I'm going to say auto button. I'm only using auto here because I don't really care what the type here is. But anyways, so I'm going to say SDL get mouse state, and I'm going to pass in a reference to x and a reference to y. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to say if the event button is equal to SDL button left. So basically, we're checking, did we click the left button? And if we did, we're going to push back into our vector of points this new location. So I'm going to say vector of points dot in place back, and then we are going to pass in an x and a y. Perfect. If you don't, I don't know why, but in one of my previous videos, I used in place back, and someone commented that it doesn't work. If this doesn't work, then try doing this with so try using pushback. Anyways. Or maybe check your compiler version, you should update it. Anyways, so basically what we're doing is we're handling a mouse button down event, and we're checking if the left button is pushed. What we're doing is we're querying this SDL get mouse state, and we are getting the x and the y positions. Or should I say, we're getting the x and y of the mouse, so we're checking where is the mouse on the screen. So we're getting the event from get mouse state, and we're querying the x and the y. So what we're doing is we're getting the location the mouse is on the screen, and we're saving that into our variable xy. Then what we're doing is we're checking if the mouse button that was clicked is the left button on the mouse. Then we're going to in place into this vector of points the new location. So basically what we're doing is we're storing inside of our container the current location of the mouse. I hope that makes sense. So I guess I can just comment here and say store the current location of the mouse. Okay, perfect. This could be a switch statement, but who cares? Now, what we also want to do is we want to get the current location of the mouse per frame. So what we're doing here is we're getting the mouse location when we actually click, but we also want to get the mouse location when the mouse moves. So what we can do is we can say if event.type, or should I say if event type is equal to SDL mouse motion event. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get the SDL, or should I say we're going to run the SDL get mouse state function again. And for this instance, we're going to pass in a reference to current.x and current.y. And this is simply to get where the mouse is on the screen and just store inside of this variable. So what I also want to do is, or should I say, I'm going to comment here and say, get the current mouse location per frame. So just to drill down again, this chunk of code is dealing with if we actually click on the mouse. So if we click the left button, we want to store in this container the location of the mouse when the button is clicked. With this one, what we want to do is we want to store the current location of the mouse per frame. So every single frame of this application, we're going to get the mouse location and store it inside this struct. Okay, so next up, what we want to do is we are going to want to check if we click the C key on the keyboard. So I'm going to say if the C key is clicked, we are going to clear the container. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say if event.type is equal to SDL key down. Now, keep in mind, this is a keyboard key down event, not a mouse key, or not, what should I say? So this is a keyboard key event. This is not going to be a mouse key event, so don't get it confused. This is for the keyboard, not the mouse. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, so if the SDL key is down and event.key.key sym dot, or should I say, event.key.key sym dot sym is equal to SDLK C. Okay, so if we click the character C on the keyboard, what do we want to do? Well, in this application, in my mind, what we're going to do is we are going to clear the container. So let's say I have too many of these points, right? So let's say I have, let's say 1,000,000 points. I want to clear them because I'm using too many resources. What I'm going to do here is simply, I'm going to say vector of points dot clear. You could also do something like a vector of shrink to fit. You could do this, but nah, I'm not going to do that. What we're doing here is we're checking if the key is down, and if the key is down, we're checking if the key C is down in particular. So that's fine. This is basically just clearing the data. So we're clearing what we're seeing on the screen. Okay, so I think this is pretty good. So what we have here is we have this little complicated event system. So it's not really that complicated, but essentially what this event system is doing is we're checking if what should I say, handle closing the window. So this is if you want to close the window, you just check if the type is equal to SDL quit. You're going to quit, nothing fancy here. Next, we have store the location of the mouse. So basically, whenever we click, store location of the mouse, if we click on the mouse. I think that should be more obvious. So what we're doing here is we're storing the location of the mouse only if we actually click on the mouse. So what we're doing is we're checking if the type is a SDL mouse button down event, then what we're doing is we're storing into X and Y the location of the mouse, then we're putting into this vector of points the variables X and Y. Next up, what we're doing is we're getting the current location of the mouse per frame. So this is basically just to get the location of the mouse every single frame. There's really no reason to do this, but I just like to do this. So down here, what we're doing is we're saying if the event type is an SDL mouse motion event, what we're gonna do is we're gonna query this get mouse state function, and we're gonna store into this struct that we declared up here, if you didn't notice. So on line 16 we have SDL point current, and this is just the SDL point, right? So this is just the XY location. Let me just go into this. So as you can see, this is just a struct of int x and int y. So it's nothing that fancy. So what all we're doing here is we are going to push into this point an x and a y, or should I say we're going to update in this point an x and a y. Next up, what we have is if the C key is clicked, we are going to clear the container. So, I mean, I can talk about this for a while. If you don't really see what I'm doing, it's not that interesting, right? So basically, all of this is just the events. So events. So next up, what we want to do is we want to draw what's happening in this, I wouldn't say game, I would say this is more of an application. I don't know, you can call it whatever you want, a graphical application if you want. So pretty much what I want to do now is I want to actually render out what's happening on the screen, or should I say what's happening in this application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say SDL set render draw, set render draw color, pass in a render 0, 0, 0, and 255. Then what we're going to do is going to say SDL render clear. Whoops. Okay. And finally, we're going to say SDL set render draw color, and we are going to set this to white. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually draw out all of the points on the screen. And the way we are going to do that is we are simply going to use the function SDL draw lines. Okay, so into this function we're going to pass in render, and then we're going to pass in vector of points. And we actually can't pass in a vector, so we're gonna get the data from this vector. So I'm gonna say data. Then we are gonna pass in the size of this vector, so vector of points dot size. This is getting a little too big, so maybe I'll make it a little smaller. Okay. So basically what we did is we basically just took SDL render. So what we did here is we just rendered out all the lines that are inside of this vector of points. So even though these are points, if you pass in a whole bunch of points into this function, it's going to render out as lines for you. Okay, so I think this is pretty much all I need, except I need to actually SDL render present. So we're going to present this, and then we pass in a render. And then I guess we can delay for about 150 seconds, and that should be fine. Okay, so let's compile it. Okay, so to compile this, we're going to do G++, and then the name of this file is mouse events.cpp. I think I have to link SDL, so L SDL2. Just to be safe. So just use the SDL20 standard, or should I say use the C++20 standard. Click enter. Okay, let's see what's there here. SDL render was not declared the scope. Oops, I guess they didn't call it properly. Where is it? Oh, okay. Okay, let's see. Unused variable. Too few arguments to SDL render clear. Okay, so I'm gonna just disable my warnings just because I want to get this out faster. Okay, so let's actually run this. What do we have? If I click here, here, I click here. So as you can see, whenever I click, I'm basically just connecting all these lines, and all these lines are being stored in a container. So pretty much we just have a container that has all of these points, and then when we render them out, we actually get this nice pattern here. So what I want to do is I want to actually make it a little more interesting, because this is kind of boring. This is just, oh, hey, look, I'm just connecting all these points together. What I want to do now is I want to iterate over this function twice. So I want to connect every single point to every single other point. So what I want to do is I want to connect every single point to every single other point on the screen. And the way we can do that is by doing this. So I'm just going to remove this for now. And we are going to say for auto point in the vector of points. And then for auto point to vector of points. Okay, so what we're going to do here is essentially we are going to just do SDL render draw line, and we're going to pass into this a render. Then I'm going to say point dot x, and then point dot y, and then it's going to end at point 2 dot x, and then point 2 dot y. Whoops. Okay. So that should be fine, I think, just to make it a little more clear. Okay, so let's compile this and see what we get. Okay, let's see. So I click here, I click here. So as you can see, we're getting an interesting pattern here. So what we're doing is, instead of connecting one-to-one, we are connecting every single point that is currently on the screen to this new point. So every time we click, we connect every single point that already exists to this new point. So as you can see, we're getting more points. The more time we click, we're getting more connections. So yeah, this is kind of interesting. So actually, let me demonstrate another thing. When I click, and I click the C key, as you can see, I'm clearing everything that I just drew. So everything I just drew, I just clicked like 100 times. And then I click C, and that clears everything for you. So again, click, 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 click C, and it's cleared. Okay. So next up, what we want to do is we want to, let's say we want to switch between one mode to another mode, right? So let's say we want to move from doing connections one-to-one to doing connections many-to-many. So let's say you want to begin by connecting one point to another, and then you switch over to connecting, let's say, every single point to every single point. How do we do that? Well, pretty much what we can do is we can just set a variable up here. So I could just set a variable, let's see. So I'm going to say int type. So this is maybe the type of connection we want. So this is going to be the type of connection we want on the screen, and this type, I'm just going to set it to 0. So it's going to start as being a 0. So what we're going to do now is we have to go into this these events and then add another event. So let's say on the keyboard, if I click M, that's going to be, let's say, connection type 1. And then if I click L, that's going to be connection type 2. So what we can do is we can say if event.type is equal to SDL key down. That sim is equal to SDLK, and then let's say if I click M, then we are going to set type to 0, or maybe let's set type to 1, and let's just copy this over. And let's change this key to L. So if we click L, then connection type is going to be 0. So what we can do here is we can say, or actually not here, here. So here's the connection logic. So we can say if type is equal to 0. I feel like I could have used the switch a lot more in the with this logic, but I don't know, I just didn't feel like doing it. Okay, so I'm going to say if type is equal to 0, then we are going to do this kind of connection. Otherwise, we are going to do, or should I say, if type is equal to 1, then we're going to do a connection where we just pass it into the SDL render points function. So SDL render draw lines. And then a vector of points dot size, or should I say data, and then a vector of points dot size. Okay, great. So what do we have now? So let's compile this and see what we got. Okay, so let's do a couple of connections. So as you can see, this is the mode where we're connecting every single point to every single other point. So let's say if I click M, we get a single point. So we're connecting one to the other. If I click M, we're basically getting this kind of like abstract art kind of deal. So let's try it again. So if I click M, we get this. If I click L, we get this. If I click C, we're clearing the canvas. So let's try again. So if I click L, this is all connected. If I click M, this is only connecting one to another. Let's click C again. Okay, now let's click L. And as you can see, we're basically connecting everything together. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, subscribe, bop the bell, etc. And I will see you later.